The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by all of my very cool co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Laura Nash.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about the latest release from Annapurna, a developer with whom we have a lot of history. And this week's release from Annapurna is A Memoir Blue by Cloisters Interactive. This is out on, I think, pretty much all of the consoles, PC, and also it's on Game Pass.
Yes, this definitely got the Game Pass bump for me. When you say this is already on one of your subscription services and this is less than 2 hours long, that definitely gets my interest for the Short Game podcast.
This is Short Game bait right here. A narrative... point-and-clicky sort of adventure that will take you under 2 hours, even if you're like me and you are absolutely horrible at point-and-click adventures, even when they make it as easy as possible for you like this game does. Even all that aside, it took me less than 2 hours to complete this game, and that right there, that's a credit to this game.
Yeah,
keen-eared listeners might have noticed that there are 4 hosts present, the full,
and that's because the game
royal flush
is served up that we could play it before the podcast after a full day of work and still make the show.
That's the wonderful thing about 90-minute games. So the reason that we wanted to do this on the show, apart from the fact that it is just 90 minutes, which, hey, that is probably the number one thing. That is, hey, tell us about a 90-minute game, listener, and we'll almost certainly check it out. But it's also in a sort of micro genre that we, as the Short Game podcast, have gravitated to a lot over the years.
Wet memoirs. We've absolutely, throughout the podcast, loved a wet memoir.
Just soggy books. We love them.
Wet memories all the way down.
So the developer describes this game as an interactive poem, which is one way of saying it. But if you've played games, there's actually a lot of games that sort of fall into this sort of loose genre of like super narrative driven. Interactions are sort of varied. There's not really game mechanics so much as just physical or tactile interactions that are part of telling a larger story. And I'm thinking, I was reminded a lot of some of the bits of things like Edith Finch, or more recently of If Found, which I thought was really good.
I don't remember If Found. What was that one?
We never covered it. It was on iOS, and I played it a year and a half or so ago now.
Yeah, this one really reminded me of Florence.
Yes.
The thing most remind in terms of the way it tells its story. They're both. I think what I'm noticing is a lot of developers who have a lot of technical ability and a lot of kind of inclination towards really wanting to use that to tell a personal story.
Yeah.
Do this same kind of style that in every one of those examples. I mean, I haven't played the second one you mentioned, Ray, but they're all just showing character animation at some of its best. And when so if it's I think it's a cool way to showcase your talents as a team, but it's such a strange storytelling medium to be getting the kind of traction that it's getting.
What was the one with the bison in the middle of the street?
Oh, you're thinking of Virginia.
Yeah.
I could kind of see that.
This was no Virginia.
Yeah, no, these are very different in my opinion. Yeah, Virginia was very rooted in like the
Twin
storytelling
Peaks sort of.
It's first person and yet very rooted in sort of film editing styles. So that's like super tied for me to the like 30 Flights of Loving and Virginia are like part of another little separate micro genre.
But I give you Virginia because of the surrealism.
Right.
And this game has, this game lives in a place where you will be on a subway underwater and there's fish flying by or swimming by rather, and you're breathing normally. So this is a game that has that kind of surreal quality. The plot of it is that, well, it's a surreal memory palace type of game. So the plot is very
timey-wimey.
Yeah, it's timey-wimey, but it opens and you're winning I think a bronze medal at the Olympics. It's really hard for me to tell medal colors in this game.
I think she was winning gold.
I couldn't tell.
The description on the page says that she's a superstar athlete, and now you got no bronze.
I couldn't tell.
I definitely think the whole experience of the game, it starts off with that image of her. I personally read that as a bronze medal. I don't know about anybody else. All
right.
But we didn't have her on a podium. It was definitely just focused on her. So we couldn't say that she was at the bottom. She was being certainly interviewed by a lot of people.
And you were the paparazzi.
And you can see this kind of terrific character animation in the way she turns away from the light of the flashbulbs. And so I think the whole game is just I was trying to make sense of this character. I was like, who is this high achieving swimmer who is clearly made incredibly uncomfortable by the attention that she's getting, right? So that had I didn't feel like I totally got the answer by the end of the game.
How much time are we going to spend trying to break down what actually happened in this game versus what we think happened versus the experience of playing it, because all of those are different answers.
Well, let me set up the fall down the rabbit hole moment, which is right after the paparazzi shot. It cuts to the girl on the couch. Her bag's open. You look in the bag and the phone rings. She ignores the call. And then the radio starts playing and you mess with the radio. You look out the window, mess with the sun, and then come back and the room is flooded. She is underwater. And then she dives through a hole in the floor and memory palace. And
you follow a series of memories where you as the main character are watching an even more animated version, presumably of yourself, through a series of events in your life. And this game is a back and forth between just watching very good and very interesting animation and little moments of essentially point and click adventure style stuff, or like point and click puzzle game. Really basic, although I exposed myself by saying basic when I struggled with it constantly. But really simple puzzle work to sort of unlock the next little cutscene, and you're just moving from scene to scene to scene, being stalled by little puzzles and little interactive moments. But really the highlight of this game, and what I think it really wants you to take away from it, is that animation and the visuals and the magical realism element of this woman remembering having as Shane would say, a wet memoir or a wet memory of I guess her falling in love with swimming, and then her relationship with her mom, and where it goes from there.
Yeah, and I'm being quiet because before my job for this episode was to find out what the story of it was canonically.
Actually,
I would love to hear everybody suffer through for a little bit.
I'll do my best. This is clearly a game about this girl's relationship with her mother. She is an adult now. I get the sense that she hasn't interacted with her mother a lot lately. And she's looking back on her young adult life with her mother, and looking at it through like a new lens, right? So she's seeing she's watching these memories that she has. And I think the fact that they're all illustrated in this very childlike 2D animated style is sort of saying, like, these are my child's memories of what was going on when I was a kid. And she's seeing this sort of journey away from her father, but she doesn't know why. And she's seeing them like starting a new life in a new town, and she's confused. she's looking back on memories of her mother not being there for her at key times, like at her swim meets, and wanting her to be there, and seeing her mother rush off to business meetings or something. She's got a briefcase, but she's seeing all of that through this sort of meetings. She's remembering it all through like a child's version, and she's seeing it. And I'm not actually don't really 100% understand the contrast, because it's not like you do see her like as an adult looking back on these like childish memories, but I don't really get the sort of like I was expecting there to be some kind of like reveal or unlocking of like, oh, I see what was going on with my mom. But I kind of didn't see it personally, but I do sort of see it as this sort of looking back on childhood memories and understanding them in a new way, even though there's like specificity is sort of lacking for me with it. That was what I was getting from it.
Yeah, for some reason I at least saw something in like her discovering her love of water, and this being what got her into swimming. And then there was I have this, even if that's not correct, I have the same sort of murky back half that I don't really know what we were supposed to take away from her experiences other than just a visually interesting thing. But I felt like the middle part, I could never quite tell what this game wanted me to understand about any of the characters, whether it was the mom, the daughter, or the fish. Who played?
I felt kind of similar about this to the way I did about Gris. You remember Grease? You remember that game, which was also sort of like figuratively telling a story.
The 7 Stages of Grief, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And it was sort of it was very figurative. This does have these sort of real world images in it, but it's all about these sort of toy-like interactions with them that kind of. Yeah, and it's always kind of coming back to this image of a child, and the child like it's kind of like rooted, I think, in like children's play but anyway, it doesn't have this sort of specific stuff in it that like tells you a story in a really explicit way. It kind of feels like a scattered bunch of vague childhood memories that kind of add up to the sense of a story, but not exact beat for beat story, which I guess is an interesting way to approach things. They do say it's a poem. Maybe that's part of their storytelling style here. And I don't know, when I think back on my own childhood, I'm sure there's huge, vast gaps where there's no concrete events and more just images and feelings and memories of play. So maybe that's exactly what they were going for here, but I did kind of leave the end of the game feeling like I wanted a little bit more of I wanted to understand the story a little better.
I think at least, I agree. I think at least a part of my problem with it is that I do think a lot of the context or at least some of the stories told through these puzzle scenes where you're interacting with objects and doing something to those objects. And I was so constantly unsure of what button I was supposed to press and why I'm supposed to do that thing, that I could never take a time to absorb from like a storytelling standpoint why I was doing those things. I was just so unsure of what I was supposed to do that when I would finally lock on whatever thing I'm supposed to fidget with or click or drag or whatever, I'd be like, okay, finally I got it. And then it's gone, and I could never really reflect on like why I was doing those things or what it meant. Like there's an entire scene with that tape deck player, that the radio that we were talking about, and you're doing a lot of sort of fidgety switching between bands on the radio, and it's showing little images. And then you'd have to click a button on the radio, I guess, to like lock it in. I was able to hit the buttons in the right series to move it forward, but I never knew why or what I was supposed to be doing in order to do those, like why I was doing those things, that I never really absorbed. Like the tape deck is like showing new images to you, and there's like a boat and like a sun or something. But I was too concerned with what do I hit next? Why am I interacting with these, that I didn't really feel like I had time to absorb that. And then it would be gone, and I'm on to my next series of little fidgety puzzles that I don't know why I'm doing these things. And that was sort of the game for me, going back and forth between really cool and sometimes very moving imagery with like fidgety puzzles that I lost sort of the forest for the trees, if you will.
And those images in that sequence is the order of the game. Those are actually the chapter markers of the game, I believe.
Great. That's cool,
So,
I guess.
Like the subway car, the boat, the billboard is like this. The song is supposed to be dredging up the memories quickly, and then she delves into them deeply. I also didn't get that until after I finished playing the game.
Can I give my like anti-corporate critique of this game?
Okay.
So the style of this game is really what I was initially really drawn to was the combination of different animation styles into one thing, which I have loved since as a child I watched Mary Poppins Dance with a Penguin, right? So that is a vibe that you actually get from this game because you have the interplay of the 2D and 3D animation, and when it's doing that in a really cool way. But both of the different like key animation styles are, to me, as I got a little deeper into it, reading as total dystopia, because there's this art style that kind of
listener, you're not hearing the strange puzzled faces that half of the podcast is making at Shane as he takes us into his interpretation of this as dystopia. Please continue.
No, I'm
Shane.
actually.
So, do you know what
Shane.
corporate Memphis is?
Yes.
Okay,
But,
Laura,
but explain it for the.
explain it for me.
So corporate Memphis is an art style of flat, kind of geometric people that you started to see all over the place in corporate communication over the course of the last 10 years.
It's like that really flat 2D, like boxy,
I know exactly
like,
what you're
cool,
talking
generic
about.
people who may or may not be multicultural.
Oh, yes.
But kind of are wavy.
Yeah, it's also called Allegria, I
Yes.
think.
Yes, I do know what you're talking about.
It's a visual style that big tech in particular seems to really like.
It
Yeah.
took the cool Memphis design and made it corporate and put it in millennial pink. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Allegria is like Facebook's version of this that they rolled out in like 2017. Apparently, I just Googled it real quick. So this is the art style, and I have always thought of this art style as a little bit dystopian because it is it's the turning of like it's like the merging of like the communication level of like a guy on a bathroom sign with the treacle of like a Hallmark card. Like it doesn't always work for me. And this game,
I always just sort of I've seen this art style everywhere, and I've always just sort of thought of it as like flat, tiny head people because they always have tiny heads. I don't know
these
why
ones
the
actually
heads
have
are always
reasonable
so
sized
tiny.
heads. So this has a second thing that artistic element going on, which there's got to be a better name for it, but I've always thought of it as Tumblr nose, which is where you have the characters whose face is like defined by a bright red, large, like sometimes perfectly triangular nose, or sometimes like red, ruddy cheeks. So this is kind of a similar thing going on there. That I'm fine with, actually. I like that style, but the more corporate-y art style, to me, a little dystopian for reasons that I think are obvious.
I want to know, like, are you referring to the like 2D illustrated mom and daughter as this? I am so surprised that you say that because I don't see these as being particularly similar at all. I thought that the art style for the mom and daughter was actually like a really solid attempt at like
okay,
like,
well, both. But maybe it's the combination because
the mom
the version
does have
of
Pixar mom bod.
She
but-
does.
yeah. She's got thick thighs
well,
that save
not
lives.
quite. The butt could have been bigger if we're talking about a Pixar mom. But the art style for the 3D stuff is like explicitly dystopian because you're constantly exploring these environments where it's like, oh, an old TV store with literal mold growing on every surface, or a flooded subway,
Very wet.
or it's very wet. You know, a lot of algae and mold.
A lot of blue, a lot of deep
Yeah.
blues.
So
Memoir
like,
Blue.
to me, you put both of those things together, which are both already kind of reading to me as like ominous, but like unintentionally, like unselfconsciously ominous. And then you use that to tell this story that is just, it feels like there's absolutely more going on than the story actually wants to tell me. Like that is the vibe I was getting, and that is why this had moments where I was like, "Ugh, what is this? Why is it giving me the ick?"
That's really weird to me. Like look, I kind of see where you're coming from, particularly about the like. There's a certain like, you know, seeing an underwater train car where you get a little bit of like, this is you know, something's wrong here, obviously. But I think that's part of the intent. Nothing seemed like corporate junk or corporate evil to me about this at all.
You're telling me she didn't look like a Sims character? The
sure,
3D
she looks a
version?
little. The 3D character looks a little Simsy or a little like, but it's fine.
So does everybody in video
Like
games.
it's
so.
a video game. She looked like a middle budget 3D animated character. Where they, you know, mostly had basic, decent animations for her, and occasionally put a little love into her face, and that was about it.
I kept thinking of Life is Strange. She felt like a character straight out of Life is Strange.
Playing the kind of games we play, I cannot be allergic to mediocre character animation, or we would be cutting out half of the stuff that we play. I am 100% fine.
We do not
engaging
need to see
emotionally, right, with a character who has like. You know, like slightly off, like character animations or something. It's fine.
That said, I will say I had perhaps the opposite effect of Shane. Is I found the 2D characters much more expressive than the 3D, especially.
Same.
Totally agree.
The 2D characters are used for the memory of the mother and the child version of the main character, and they are just so full of life. They're just very fluid, very animated, and like
which I'm almost offended Shane was comparing those to like Facebook guy 2D
shape wise. Sure, the art style is very different, but like shape wise, they do have the kind of blobby.
Yeah,
I can. Get
by the way,
where
if you are interested in that style of art being subverted, Going Under is a game that all of the art is attempting subversions of that of the corporate Memphis style, and it's really funny. It does it very intentionally. It's a game about corporate tech culture where everything looks like that by design. This is not doing that, in my opinion. And in fact, I would compare the art style for the mother and daughter animation as a little more in line with like film animation for things like what's that studio that did like Secret of the Kells or whatever?
It's Cartoon Saloon.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully done. And like it's got these very expressive but like minimalistic things, like the big round red cheeks on the daughter and some of the other.
Yeah,
so I did dislike when they did shadow puppets because they were very scary to me. The shadow puppet versions, because the eyes cut out and they looked evil, and then I had to be like, no, this is supposed to be charming.
Yeah, the 2D animation and the expression of the daughter and the mom is really where this game actually did work for me, and I started to realize like I might have been a little biased or impacted in this moment because I have two daughters right around the age of the girl in this, so I kept being like, oh, she's sad, someone help her, you know. And I don't want to gatekeep any sort of emotion for a child here, but like for me personally, I was thinking like this is where this game was actually effective for me, and I thought that really worked, and I thought it was an interesting balance. You know, 2D on top of 3D is not anything new, but I thought that was what stood out to me in this game, and where I really enjoyed it, when I could clearly tell why something was happening, and you know, the way that people were reacting to it. I enjoyed it. It was when we got into these truly abstract moments or these fidgety puzzle things is where it kind of fell apart for me and became less fun or less engaging. But I think this game in some ways is worth playing, even though we're not really necessarily talking about.
Oh, I would argue that this is 100% worth playing.
Yeah.
I know that I've had some reservations about it just because we're discussing it as a piece of art.
Yeah.
And it's worth critiquing. But I think that this is absolutely worth playing. I think it's a really well done thing. I do think it's probably time for us to move on to talking about the story a little bit more. Laura was getting ready to talk about her more authoritatively and well researched, based on developer interviews, take on the story. But before that, I do have one take on the interactivity. Oh, sure.
I mentioned beforehand. For me,
I have a question about it.
Florence is my gold standard because the interaction is what gives the cutscenes meaning. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a puzzle in there about having conversations with somebody you're in a relationship with. And at the beginning, it's a puzzle piece. There's multiple puzzle pieces, and it's very difficult. But the more you talk to them, you get fewer puzzle pieces, and then you're just putting whole blocks down. So they're using the mechanic to simulate the feeling of clicking with somebody, literally. So I that is a ridiculously high standard, but that's what I hold games to. Sometimes this game had puzzles that were like, oh, before I can open the door to presumably hidden memories, I need to cut away some vines. Like, sure, like I need to untangle some stuff. Like, I see that metaphor. Other times I did not see meaning behind the actions I was taking, and I was just doing something, and it was very toy-like. So I think I want the meaningful ones to be like at least 50% of the game. That's and it didn't quite get to that ratio.
I would argue, and maybe I missed a lot, which is absolutely very, very possible. I have a history on this show of missing the broader meaning of a lot of things, but I would argue 90% of the puzzles in here were just a representation of some sort of physical thing that you do in the real world that she was remembering. Like stamping her ticket to get on the boat or whatever, and then you have to stamp the ticket to get on the boat. But there was no, the puzzle was not representing any broader emotion or deeper memory. It was just literally they're making you do a physical thing that she's remembering being a part of it. And that was not very satisfying to me. Unlike what you're talking about with Florence, where the puzzles, the challenge of the puzzle was a representative of also the feelings of the characters in that moment. And again, as you said, that's a very, very high bar. But this game is all about sentimentality and the emotional elements of memory and growing up and whatnot. And it just felt really strange having to all right, where do I put this little card? Why? All right. So,
How do I get the boat to go?
What do
I
gotta
how do I get?
What?
I just have to push this stamp thing down, right?
Yeah.
Push it down.
I didn't realize you could push it down. Oh, I spent 15 minutes. Yeah. It was
sometimes you push a button and a thing happens. Other times you have to hold the button down and use an analog stick to make the thing happen.
There's a green button that I have. I have to hit the green button,
and then the thing drops out.
Can
I explore this a little bit, because a lot of us are all discussing this as the core of the gameplay that we're discussing. But we're all using all these different terms. Nate was calling them puzzles. I think everyone was using other terms like toy-like, or it's a interaction, or it's a so these sit at this, and this is true of all these games that we're discussing is similar. These interactions sit somewhere in between a toy and a puzzle and a mini game and maybe just a mechanic. And what are these, and why is just a random assortment of them something you were seeing so much in this particular kind of game? I think about Edith Finch. I think back about that a lot.
Yeah, Edith Finch has a lot of the same thing where it's a it's telling stories, and each story has its own unique set of scenes or moments, and those moments have to have something that you're doing, and then that thing that you're doing is changing a lot. It's changing constantly as you're playing through. I I shy away from puzzles or mini games or anything, and just sort of think of. I think I've just been calling these like interactions or whatever, and that's the best I can come up with for this kind of thing. Why are they here? It is literally just because if you're, if there's nothing, then it's a movie, and that's not wrong. You could make a movie, and this probably would have been okay as a movie. But at its best, what these games are shooting for is involving you in the story, like Laura was describing earlier, like Nate was describing, involving you in the story by having you take part in it in a small way. And ideally, hopefully, that way in which you're taking part in it is doing it in a way that's going to align you with the emotion that the scene is trying to convey. So if it's a frustrating scene, having you do something frustrating. If it's a scene about remembering joy or remembering a childlike moment of play, involving you in an interaction that evokes childlike play, that kind of thing. And then hopefully also just sort of giving you that sort of moment of surprise or tactile delight. There's always that sort of, sometimes you just do a thing in a game and it's like, wow, that's cool. And that's what this is trying to sometimes do as well, is just give you small moments of delight as you discover the way that the thing is interactive. And I guess that's it. So like, what is it for? It's just for making sure it's not a movie and doing it in the most delightful way possible.
I think they would lean too heavily on, we need them to do something. They spent too much time thinking if they could, Raygan. They didn't think long enough whether they should.
No, the real should they was the Xbox achievements.
Dude, that needs to change. As a developer, you need to be able to say, okay, we have, and maybe you can, and just no one is doing it. But the amount of emotional moments that games are trying, and then it's like, Guduk, swim hard to, and you're like, oh, okay, get the fuck away from me. The few emotional elements in this game I really connected with were almost always undercut by the stupid little Xbox.
You're playing a game where like your child has just died, and then you can like, and you get an achievement called something like
there's always another,
and it's like
you like, if you cry to the left, you knock over an umbrella and it says something like umbrella time.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's really bad.
I got one in this game where like I just clicked on a fan and
I did that too.
I just in the middle of a scene that like I was trying to figure out what to do, I clicked on a fan and it was like, congratulations, you turned on the fan or something like that.
We're a fan
achievement.
We're a fan of you. Yeah,
it's called fan service.
Yeah.
Fan service. Oh, good Lord.
It's
makes
bad.
me so angry. I hate you.
It's really bad.
Oh, it's so bad.
I would be fine with these if the developers had a way, and I don't know if this exists, and this is probably what you're talking about, Nate, is like turning off the notification.
The notification, yeah.
Like, tell me after I finished the game, maybe. Or like, defer the notifications to the end of the level.
Do a check at the end of the level.
Achievements
I really
are fun.
should just turn all achievements off. Who cares? Why have I never turned that off?
Well, it's not.
Is there? I don't even know if there's a way to turn them off.
If you want to look at your whole list in the middle of the game you're playing, you're like, I've never once wanted to do this.
That's not what this game wants you to do. I can't believe there must be some. Maybe there's some like agreement with Game Pass, even where you have to have achievements because of all the gamer score bullshit.
I think it is a requirement on consoles. Like they make that like I know for a fact that on PlayStation they're required to, and they have some kind of thing they have to do with
minimum X
with the platform holder where they have to decide how difficult the achievements are so that they can decide whether they're like platinum or not. Right?
Yeah,
I don't know, but I know it's a thing they have to do.
Yeah. They're fun in certain games. I've been talking about it for more than almost a year now because it takes me forever. But like on a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, which has a very emotional main story, achievements are fun in that game though because sometimes you're pulling off rare stuff that you didn't even know was rare, and it's like, and you're like, oh, cool, I did something that not a lot of people have done. In a game that is purely about narrative, it never helps. All it does is undercut a moment.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So I am dying to know what it was that Laura learned from her. And
I went and read a couple of developer interviews, but I don't think I did read the same one you did, Laura. So
should we give a statement though? Like, this is technically spoilers, but I think like if you're this far in the episode,
game better.
Yeah. I agree.
If you don't want to know anything about it,
Yeah, it's
Don't
not a
listen.
spoiler if it improves things.
But I think it would have improved my enjoyment of the game to know this before I played. And that is, this game is autobiographical.
Okay.
In that, the developer, the designer, the art director, she wanted to make a story about a day trip she remembered when she was a kid. She wanted to make as her thesis project. And so she called her mom and was like, "Hi, can you give me some details about this day trip we took?" And her mom was like, that wasn't a day trip. That was us escaping from your father, who was abusive. And that was us running away. And I took you to things along the way, but that wasn't a day trip. That was an escape. And she was so shocked that she and her mother remembered this day differently. And as an adult, she was going back through all of the memories she had for the day and reevaluating, what did I see? Oh my God, that was this. Reinterpreting the day and all the things that happened on it through this new lens, that she rethought the day, the game she was going to build. So this game is about an adult. The radio is playing a song that she hears during that runaway, and so she hears the song and it takes her back, and she reinterprets this day trip as oh wait, this was my mom going through a painful situation, and then now with that context, she enters that vault section and is oh. And now that I know, this is my mom had to work because of the single mom stuff. And now I have empathy towards my mom and I can reinterpret my adult life with my mother now that I know this memory. So the whole game completely changed.
Well,
I
think I got 80% of that.
Yeah.
I was most of the way there.
I
I think what I didn't really gather from it was the reinterpretation stuff. I do get, now that you mentioned, there's that moment at the end where she sort of opens the vault and inside she has the scene with her mother.
But you get the to me, I was oh, it's a divorce. You get dad is bad, mom alone, mom is working.
Yeah, you pick up on that.
That stuff's
you
all
get
really
sort of
clear.
vague image of the dad looking like he's threatening. Or
let's
punching
not
him.
jump to any conclusions about who
Most of us
got
got
what and who interpreted what. Hey, I'm saying for the listener, let's not.
But to me, I think the thing was the looking back on the child version of you is you're finally the 2D animation is mostly showing it's showing different views of the same memory, the 3D space around the memory of what you remember and then what actually.
I mean, that's a really compelling. That's a really compelling point of view, and a really
very unclear to me in the game, but
yeah, and it's a really compelling story to tell. I personally did not get any of especially the reinterpretation through that lens. I did think it was something to do about re-understanding your relationship with your mom now as an adult, understanding the decisions that your mom made. You could tell there was some sort of falling out and she was willing to forgive her or something like that. But I had never thought it was a reinterpretation of the entire context of why the mom was doing the things that she was doing. To me, it was just seemed like just standard childhood stuff, so that's really compelling. I guess that is helpful to know out of the gates. It increases the sentimentality of the game for me and clears it up a lot. I wish that, I didn't have to learn about it way after. I don't know how they could have done it better in the game without straight up telling you.
Because there's no text anymore.
There's no text or anything. And again, there's so much time spent on finicky stuff that I didn't feel as able to spend time thinking about why am I doing any of this?
And they also talked about a couple of the puzzle designs, when you're in the subway car and there's a moment where you're peeling away posters.
Yeah.
And you occasionally reveal pictures, and it's supposed to be peeling away the layers of what you thought your
Yeah.
your family is pretending to be versus what it is. And
That's a really cool idea, but
in retrospect, it makes more sense.
Yeah, if you tell me that's what you're doing, oh, they're peeling away the facade of their own memory. Okay, that's cool. I like that. But I mean, it's one of like, it's like one of 40 little things that you're doing that I can't, like, that right there is a good one, but I can't imagine all of these little things that you were doing had that degree of depth to them. Or if they did, like, I mean, I feel like you'd miss, I missed all of it, you know?
I'm pretty sure I got about 80% of that out of it. And I don't know exactly what they could have done to like hammer it home a little more. I feel like the key thing they were trying to convey here was this idea of like reevaluating a memory, which I think is something we've all done, you know, like you always have this idea of like looking back on your childhood and reevaluating your, you know, like the things that you thought of one way when you were a child and now think of a different way.
Yeah.
And if they're going all like telling things impressionistically or sort of via like, you know, heightened or metaphorical imagery, like I feel like they could have played more with that, you know, have things transform, you know, have interactions that would transform something into something else to
I mean, like, I don't know if they took the day trip to an aquarium or if she just really likes fish. I'm assuming like part of that day trip was an aquarium because the fish are everywhere, but
yeah,
I don't.
So, yeah. And then there was clearly like a boat ride involved and they went to a little island. I don't know.
What's missing to me is a disconnect between the two versions of the memory, because you have these two visual styles, but it really kind of reads as just like now and then, you know, like and it doesn't really read as a disconnect between what she now thinks and what really happened, or like the mother's perspective and the child's perspective. So when we do go back through it, it doesn't, like, there are long moments where, you know, you're uncovering something, right? And it's like, oh, well, we're going deep into the water and now we're going to look, and what's really revealed, you know, seems just like the next moment in the story. You know, there's the little girl sees fish run away from her, so in the next scene she is crying and her mother hugs her. You know, it's like, I don't feel there's a disconnect even when we're going back and forth between 3D animated adult version of the young lady and the child version. Like, it just feels like we are remembering.
You're just watching it right along her. Yeah, you're not sitting there like, she's not like, oh, maybe I did remember that incorrectly. You know, she's just like watching it just like you are. And for the most part, your attention is on the really, really nice 2D animation. So I don't, you know, maybe the character was, you know, there was moments of revelation on her face that I didn't catch. But for the most part, that's why for a lot of this, I thought this was more just it was a way simpler story, less about like her dad or whatever. And it was more just her discovering a love of swimming and then having a falling out with her mom and then reconnecting with her mom over some sort of victory or something like that. Like the 3D person just seems to just be watching and not engaging or being a part of it. So yeah, maybe
not reacting emotionally to it.
Yeah, there's no reaction. I think maybe reducing some of the finicky puzzle stuff or interactions, whatever toy shop stuff that you want to call it, and give me a little bit more context or a little bit more reaction from the main.
Make the dissonance part of the game is what I want.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
There's also the whole important character here. They're fleeing the father, who's pictured, I think, for
once,
like a third of a second.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard to really
typical
see.
Shane. Why don't we hear from the father?
That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if this is about her perspective of that time, like, we don't see that inciting element of it at all.
Well, there's no seemingly inciting element or climactic element. Like, I at least never saw why any of this was happening and what changed to make her run and hug her mom. Like,
I think if you were going to show like a child's view versus adult's view of a moment, like there's nothing better than to zero in on like what were they fleeing, like what was the mother shielding her from, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
that's the sort of thing that might have brought more of a focus on this. Although I understand that she's wanting to focus on this journey that they took together, but
that's a cool story. That's a very lovely is not the right word for it, but I do think that's a really compelling thing for a memoir.
That's the stakes of the story.
Yeah, this separation between what you as a child view as a wonderful day is probably like one of the worst days of the mom's life, right? And that's a really interesting split. And maybe they should just put it on the box.
Yeah, it feels. When I was playing it, it was more of a tonal watch, and I wonder if I had known the reason I'm saying like this is not a spoiler is I think if I had known up front, I would be looking for tonal disconnects and I'd be looking for mismatches and I would notice more because it's not super. It doesn't scream out at you.
This goes back to the animation style for me of the mom and daughter, because although the animation is lovely and the characters move beautifully, they're not expressing the pain or the struggle,
but the daughter wouldn't be
the story,
right? That's the point. Yeah. So the mom
but
would.
Where do we get that?
Yeah.
Where do we get that?
I was reading it as like, mom is sad about a divorce, and the kid is happy on a boat.
But if it's the daughter's memories, then if she only remembers it as a wonderful day, she probably wouldn't be remembering the mom being upset, right? That's why we need that like new lens on it, that like. To see that this is actually rough for her. If we're seeing it from a children's point of view, we like it makes sense to me that she doesn't remember her mom being upset, because why would you if it's a day trip or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
Well, before we move off of all of this, I have one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is I also don't want to be a huge downer here, but I also wanted to take a second and talk about this. So this is another release from Annapurna.
Yeah.
And this has been a weird year for Annapurna. And I feel like I have reevaluated them as a developer, or excuse me, as a publisher. Like they were one of our favorite, everything they release we are going to cover on this show publishers. Like we're talking about since 2017 when they released things like Edith Finch and Flower and Gorogoa. Man,
and
Gorogoa was amazing. And
Gorogoa
Florence, I forgot. Well, that was 2018. Donut County, Gone Home, 2019, Outer Wilds. They did the re-release of Journey, Telling Lies, Sayonara, Wild Hearts. And then 2020 also
Solar Ash,
Killer, Kentucky Route Zero, If Found. They did the re-release of Unfinished Swan, which I was glad to see.
But then
things started kind of turning for the weird, right? I Am Dead, which we covered and I thought was okay, but just okay.
No fun to find your keys.
Yeah. I don't remember.
The Pathless was pretty darn good, I thought.
Yeah,
you're right.
They also did 12 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So 2021 was, I think, where the wheels fell off of Annapurna. Like Maquette, which I didn't personally play, but I didn't think sounded like it was for me. It sounded like it was bolting, like it had a clever, like mechanic or sort of puzzle idea, but that they had bolted on some really awkward story and voice content too, which we then talked about a lot again when the same thing was done with 12 minutes, but even worse. That game was laughably bad. We had a fun time talking about it, but I think it was a really bad game. Last Stop, I played a good chunk of and thought was terrible to the point where we didn't cover it on this podcast. I thought Last Stop was just awful.
I totally bounced off of The Artful Escape.
Me too. I was like, nope, not gonna.
I haven't played that, but I heard from both of you guys, it really sounded like it wasn't for us.
No.
Or at least, and then here we are at Memoir Blue, which feels more like, to me, it's more I Am Dead than If Found, for me, or than Gone Home is such a high watermark. It's hard to, and also they did the re-release but so that hardly counts. But anyway, like it just feels like they've kind of like they're pursuing a vibe rather than just ruthlessly pursuing good ideas. They're like trying to recapture something. I'm projecting here, maybe, I don't know.
I think they're landing it on the they're continuing to have games that have very appealing vibes to me and good ideas, but the thing that's missing for me is the writing. This game has essentially no writing, and like Solar Ash was a lot of fun. Writing was very minimal. The Artful Escape had a lot of writing, and that was and 12 minutes, and those were where things really started to fall down for me. So a lot of these games are living and dying based on how well they tell a story. And they're doing it often really well in visuals and in like the artistic design and the interaction.
They have not released one ugly looking game.
No.
Yeah.
They're always spectacular looking. But I'm starting to be like,
they're no longer an automatic thing for me. Like they're in this case, they're automatic for us because it is 90 minutes long and it was on Game Pass, and that was the stars aligned perfectly. But like, and Annapurna was on the on the sheet, but like Annapurna is no longer a guaranteed play for me anymore. I'm still looking forward to a lot of the stuff they have left to release this year, and some of it seems a little off of their beaten path. Their next big game on their release schedule is Neon White, which is a really strange first-person shooter parkour card thing that looks incredible. I actually don't know what Hindsight is. It's on the list here. Stray is that game about being a cat.
That's been kicking around forever.
Been kicking around forever. And
on premise alone, though, I mean, that's a classic.
Mm-hmm. And then they're going to be publishing Open Roads from Fulbright later this year, which I'm still cautiously optimistic about, despite the just upsetting sort of worker news out of Fulbright over the last little while. I mean, I'm still probably going to play the game, and I'm still looking forward to it.
I am going to continue to be really tempted by Annapurna's games. I feel that I am no longer easily drawn in by their interactive poetry.
Maybe so. But like, I'll probably still keep giving it a go because
several of us tried the Artful Escape.
4 years of pretty much perfect execution, and now we're hitting a little road bump. Hopefully they can. And it's hard.
Back. They are a publisher; they're not a developer. Yeah. It's not like we can like. They're looking for good stuff, right? And I believe also their MO is kind of coming in, sort of middle of development cycle and providing some funds and getting people over the finish line. And so maybe these are projects. Not every single project can will look great in the middle and then perfectly execute that last half. Maybe this was a project that I got that vibe off of something like 12 Minutes, where like maybe this was a project that went off the rails after the publisher got involved or something. Who knows?
And for this game, I don't think it went off the rails. I think it just needed some.
It just coasted to a stop at the end.
Well, and once we know, based off of what Laura explained, and you look at some of the visuals of this game, like, of course, this feels like a slam dunk Annapurna game. Mm-hmm. It's emotional.
But an outside eye, like, this isn't strong enough.
Yeah,
this isn't coming through strong enough. Would have really helped this game.
Yeah. And I can't imagine that being an easy thing to do either. Coming into a project as personal as this,
right?
And it's not like writing a novel where you can be like, well, do some rewrites on this chapter, and one person goes off and does that. You tell somebody to like rework something in a game dev project like this, and we're talking about adding a year and multiple salaries to, so it's not as simple as just, hey, this needs some reworking, go off and do it for a while. Although I'm sure they do that.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know. If it were possible for this to have gotten some revisions, I think it could have been a stronger story. But, that all said, I do still recommend people check this out. Maybe more than other, I would check this out over 12 Minutes any day. Although 12
low
Minutes
bar,
maybe more interesting as an absolute disaster of a game.
12 Minutes was the ultimate bait and switch. I thought I was going to be done with that game in literally 12 minutes, and as a short game enthusiast, I'm still very disappointed about that.
Sure, buddy. But yeah, I would recommend people check this out. It's on Nintendo Switch, it's on all the other consoles, and it's on Game Pass, including PC and the Xbox. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. And especially if you have it if you have the Game Pass subscription. I think this is one of, we've said this before, this is one of those examples of where a subscription model really makes sense on the consumer end, because I don't think you're going to get wide swaths of the gaming public, paying, an indie game price tag for a 90-minute poem. But if you are on that subscription service, spending an evening with a beautiful interactive poem is a pretty good way to spend those 90 minutes. You can do this and still have time to play some Elden Ring in the evening. I can tell you, because that's what I did. So I would recommend it.
This game might be the opposite of Elden Ring. Like the very opposite of Elden Ring.
Absolutely. Before we leave it and go, do we have time for a little bit of what's making us happy this week?
I got a really short one.
Go for it.
I have not talked about this on the podcast, but it's giving me great delight. I'm a big fan of a fine backpack. My favorite backpack is the Timbuktu. I think it's called a Rocket Pack. I need to double check the name of it. I'll double check that and put it in the show notes. But it's basically a very generic rucksack with a laptop pouch and a nice roll top. And I wanted a second one so that I could have one for work and one for my junk. And I kept my eBay search going. And they were still expensive. I just wanted to find a cheap one used. I found a brand new one for really cheap, and the price was really low because it was a cast and crew giveaway for the movie Daddy's Home 2, and it has Daddy's Home 2 embroidered all over the back of it. And I love it. I love my Daddy's Home 2 bag.
I love that for you. It's so good. Daddy's Home 2.
I got it right here. Not even. I put on it. I've decided I'm going to cover it with patches to de-emphasize the DH2 embroidery. So my bag now has Mountain Goat's Pagan Crew, Daddy's Home 2.
John Darnell would approve.
I very much approve as well. Laura, what's making you happy this week?
So I saw 2 movies recently in theaters that are just the most movie I could have possibly watched. I cannot think of more movie I could have packed in. I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is going to be people's favorite movie. If it's for you, you're going to love it. If it's not for you, you're going to bounce off it incredibly hard, and I'm sorry for you. I loved it. I thought it was glorious. People are going to be talking about this, so I'm not going to say too much now. But I also got to see it with the director Q&A afterwards.
Ooh, wow.
We were in the second row, and there was no one sitting in front of us. So the directors were absurdly close. The directors are closer to me than my husband currently is in our studio apartment, the Daniels, and they were very charming. And then yesterday, because I worked a bunch of extra hours last week, and I have a government job where you're not supposed to work extra hours, I took hours off yesterday, and I saw RRR, which is an Indian action epic, and it is the most gonzo action movie I've ever seen. Like, it is just like, like the energy when you watch like a really great like Hong Kong action movie where they just go harder than you've ever seen a Western movie go. It was that, but Indian. So there was also like a dance number, 2 dance numbers. There was a bromance in it. I guess skip it if you don't like violence or you like colonialism, because it's definitely about like it is Inglourious Bastard style in that it's what if these 2 actual Indian revolutionaries in the 1920s who fought against the Raj, what if we just like totally ignored what they actually did? They never met. What if we said we met, they became best friends, one was an undercover cop, and they both had superhero powers? One was friends with tigers? It's just absurd. There's a part where one, like in a sequence where someone has their legs hurt, and the one guy puts the other one on his shoulders, and they're running, and he has 2 guns in his arms, and he leans back and he kills people behind him. And then they crawl up a guard tower, and then the guy on top holds on. He looks down to the guy below, nods, and then they flip backwards. So the guy on the bottom flips up through the air and takes out the guard on top. It is and everyone in the audience is like, yes, kill those Brits.
That's wild.
Subtlety is overrated. One of the shots towards the end is a blood spatter of a bad guy goes onto a map of the British Empire that says the sun never sets on the British Empire. And I was just like, yes, art. Who needs subtlety? I don't. It'll show up on Netflix soon. So it's 3 hours and 8 minutes, which is somehow only 10 minutes longer than the Batman. And I guarantee you're going to have more fun in this one.
After this week's game, I could use a little unsubtle art.
Oh yeah. It's absolute just madness. It's great.
That sounds great. I'm going to confess again on the podcast and say that so I go through weird manias and I get into weird holes with different types of media, and this month was apparently romance novel audiobook month, or more specifically, like mostly, not entirely, but mostly contemporary romance, which is something I'd really never spent any time reading before. I'd read some like more historical romances in the past. But I guess I sort of just like broke the seal, and I listened to, I think, 9 romance novel audiobooks in the last like month and a half.
Wow.
It was a lot.
I'm in awe.
And I might be done for a while.
What's your genre? Do you have to like friends to lovers, enemies to lovers? Do you go like fantasy? Do you like the fantasy stuff?
I'm getting to where I'm exploring more of the various subgenres, but I knew going in that what I was particularly interested in was enemies to lovers.
Oh, of course, yes. We know this about you.
genre.
Why did I even ask?
Yeah, Laura,
Why
come
did you
on.
ask?
Come on.
So, okay.
There could be like, like they're a bully at first,
and the woman's really mean.
Yeah, it's a mean girl.
Or the guy. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but really,
too.
ideally,
like
it's a mean girl. It starts.
Yeah. So, okay, how many book recommendations can you stand? Do you want 1, 2, 3, or 4?
All of them.
You want all of them? I'll try to make these quick then. Okay.
I don't want all of them.
Is this a vote or
all the ones you recommend?
These are okay. The ones that of these are the ones that I recommend. I really enjoy, with a caveat. I think this is also understood that romance novels are inherently horny, and some of them are more horny than others.
Yes, facts.
I'll try to explain which ones are going to make your uncles and aunts
the spicy
blush.
pepper ratings.
Right, the spicy pepper rating. So I going back through my Goodreads. I think one of the first ones I read, and which I liked the most, you won't be surprised, was called The Hating Game. These are all some of them
I
pretty
read that
popular.
one. That one was
You
great.
like that one? I love that one. Okay, so a lot of these are pretty popular because understand, I'm scraping this genre for the first time. So I was going through a lot of best of lists. So most of these, if you are familiar, are probably going to be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, or I've read it, that sort of thing. But I really liked The Hating Game. It is an office romantic comedy about 2 sort of corporate executive types who share an office. They're both sort of work just below the co-CEOs of a publishing house. This woman and the guy that she absolutely loathes. She has to sit across from him for her entire work day, and they play sort of one-upmanship games constantly as they're working. So there's a staring game, there's a reporting each other to HR game, et cetera, et cetera.
Classic game.
As they play these increasingly over the top games with each other, sparks fly.
Love starts to blossom.
Would you believe? It's also very sexy. I like.
So is this like basically Dwight / Jim?
That's what I was thinking The Office as well.
Sure. Another one that's many more spicy peppers. I liked The Kiss Quotient, which is
this is also a very good book.
Which is
should Shane and I just leave? Long. Is this just Laura and Raygan corner for a little?
I thought about just calling Laura to have this conversation, but I figured we'd put it in the podcast.
Hey, why talk to anyone if it's not for content? So
exactly. I don't talk to my friends if it's not on a mic. The Kiss Quotient is really nice. It's the main character is a woman who is on the autism spectrum, and she has had a lot of failed relationships, and so she's decided that what she really needs is to get over her fear of sex, and she does that by hiring a hot male prostitute to teach her how to fuck.
Jesus.
Yes, it's
Jesus
great.
Christ!
That was
very, very good at statistical analysis, but not relationships. So she hires herself a practice boyfriend.
Yes. It's the fake dating trope, which is common in all romance novels. And but here it's like fake dating with benefits.
Yeah.
It's very sexy. It's very sexy. If we're going the full four, there's I guess here I'll leave it with one more. Also in a similar vein, I liked The Love Hypothesis. Another very this one was very, very contemporary. It's a woman who is in a graduate program in STEM. I think she's some sort of scientist studying something about cancer. I forget the details there. And for, kooky romance novel situation reasons, she has to pretend to be dating her scary and mean, nobody likes him, he's a professor who not directly over her in her department, but basically. And it's the same fake dating trope, but also very, very funny and sexy. And also I liked that one because of its sort of STEM focus, which I thought was very good. So all three of those A+, I thought. There were some others that I read as well that were not as good, but I liked all three of those. So there you go. That's
Please DM me your rejects file so I can.
Oh, sure. I will, Laura. I will. I think Nate, you're still what's making you happy.
Shane has retreated from the mic.
Shane's gone. Bye, Shane.
Bye,
I've already
Shane.
Embarrassed him to death. Nate, what's making you happy this week?
So I have talked about this band before on this show, and I'm a huge fan. They're actually a local band that opened up for Bit Brigade multiple times. That band I've talked about before, where they Bit Brigade is a fantastic band where they do speed metal covers of video game music while someone on stage speed runs a game. Truly sensational experience. I highly recommend if they happen to come to your area. And a local band that I know some of the guys of, but they've been around for like 10 years. They're finally putting out their first record, and their single is now on Spotify, and I think it's and everything, Bandcamp and YouTube and whatnot. The band is called Thorax, Thor space Axe.
Oh,
and
good one.
The song is called Birthquake, and
Oh wow,
they are phenomenal. They're essentially like a metal band. It's fully instrumental, but it is as close to video game music that I think you'll find in like the metal space that isn't straight up just speed metal covers of video game music. It's all original. Some of the best musicians that I've seen, they play all of this live. It's phenomenal. They don't call themselves video game music. They don't claim any sort of connection to video game music, but it is clearly heavily inspired. And I don't know if you have ever like had this experience where you're listening to music and you just think, I want to play a video game with this music as the background. This band is the most I've ever had that experience. Every single one of their songs would be a phenomenal backing track to like a Mega Man style game. So I highly recommend you go and listen to Birthquake by Thorax. It's phenomenal, and the whole thing through, you'll find yourself wanting to play like Mega Man or something. It's awesome, and their full album comes out in like a month and a half or so. So just go check it out. It's all over. It's on everywhere you listen to music. And the full album will come out later in May, I think. But I've been waiting for them to record for a long time. I think Shane is listening right now, or at least he's pretending to.
I got it.
Shane, never do that in public. Listeners, Shane was rocking out in a way that I thought was very embarrassing.
He had full hook-em horns going.
Yeah. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, which is where you'll find all the ways to contact and support us. You can find us on Twitter @_shortgame. There's the contact form on our website. You can email us info@theshortgame.net. number one most important thing you can do is our Patreon. We're at patreon.com/theshortgame, which is where you can support the show with even just $1 a month. And hey, if you support us for $5, I will send you some stickers, and they will be really cool stickers, guys. And of course, you also get the benefit of joining our Discord community, which is where we talk about the games that we're playing, and also just about other stuff. So if you want to talk to me about romance novels, or talk to Laura about the strange Indian film she was just describing, this is the place you go. Patreon.com/theshortgame. Join up there, and you'll get instantly whisked away into our Discord, and we'll be happy to have you. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
Shane, where can people find you?
So on Twitter at 8bitshane.
And I forgot to mention, I'm Raygan Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at RayganK. And listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.